Good morning, podcast listeners. This is Ed Franklin with the Ed Franklin No Limits podcast. Every guest I have on is special, and I have a very special guest on today, and I'll introduce her in just a second. You can always reach me at edfranklin.nolimits@gmail.com. If you want to be on my podcast or know somebody that wants to be on my podcast that would be interesting, or even if they're not interesting, I'll take them anyway. So make sure you're sharing my podcast on a regular basis, and follow me on YouTube, and I'm on Apple, Spotify. I'm everywhere you find a podcast, I'm there. So today, interestingly enough, we have my guest from last week that was my Alaska guest, Nathan Byrd. We have his wife, Lacey, and Lacey has her own business and does all these things. And she's one of these people that you don't even need to know her. When you're done listening to her, you're going to be motivated, because I see her on Facebook and I'm always encouraged by her positive attitude and everything. So Lacey, welcome to my podcast.
Thank you.
I just asked you a question. I said, did you grow up in Alaska too? And you said no. But you tell me where you grew up. I think this is going to be an interesting story.
Well, I grew up in Oregon. I actually spent about 10 years of my childhood. I grew up on a Christmas tree farm, but I bounced around a lot as a kid because I was in and out of foster homes and kind of, but I mostly like to say that I grew up on a farm in Oregon.
Well, that has to be a lot of work, right?
Yes.
It sounds fun, right? It's Christmas, but that's got to be a lot of work getting ready for a holiday or something. It must have been crazy.
I mean, hauling trees as a 8-year-old and bucking hay, and it definitely built some habits of hard work.
Yeah.
When I was younger, and I loved it. I loved being outside.
What part of Oregon were you in?
So between Portland and Salem, there's a little town called Molalla, Oregon, up in the mountains towards like Mount Hood area.
Okay. So my dad's family grew up in Spokane, Washington.
Okay.
I still have some family up in Washington, and we visited Portland often because I had an uncle that lived there. So we'd always stop in there. And I love Oregon. It's a little wet for me, a little cloudy.
Yeah.
I'm a Southern California boy, so it's hard for me to.
That's why we left.
Yeah.
I was over it.
So I said while we were talking before this, I know that you have your own identity. I don't want to interview Nathan's wife. I want to interview Lacey. So tell me what you got going on. I know I see you all the time doing these exercises, and I'm like, well, I can't do that, but
yeah. I've been in the fitness industry for a little over 10 years now, and it all started with, I've been in fitness my whole life, and I like to say fitness really saved my life. It saved me from going down a really bad path due to a lot of things that were happening around me. But I just dove into it more and more and more as an athlete myself. And then I started getting into coaching, and I was a trainer, and I just fell in love with it. I fell in love with being able to challenge people. I'm not really a coddler, so I'd be a terrible nurse. I'm not really somebody that's like, oh, tell me about all your problems. I like to fix things. And so it was such a good, energizing place for me. And then I started training people, and then I started taking on clients with different kinds of issues. Like I've dealt with professional athletes, I've dealt with Paralympic athletes, those were my favorite. I've dealt with senior citizens that have declining health conditions like Parkinson's, and I just love whatever age somebody's at, wherever they're at in their body. I love the fact that you always have the opportunity to take the next step forward wherever you're at. And so I love that about that. I started my own business, and it's called Hybrid Athlete Training. And it started with one-on-one training, and I was coaching people individually, doing nutrition plans for them. I specialize in corrective exercise and functional training. So avoiding pain, avoiding injury, especially chronic injury. And then it scaled and grew, and now I have 5 other coaches underneath me that all came up through working with me, and they were inspired, and they're like, I want to help other people too. I love this. And so I got them certified. I trained them and coached them, and now they're taking on clients of their own. And now we're getting into the corporate wellness space. And what I'm most excited about is we're launching a program specifically for teen girls between the ages of 13 and 18 to teach them about nutrition, teach them about their bodies, teach them about their hormones, because the amount of people that have reached out to me in the last year alone is crazy, asking like in desperation, like, my daughter, like, I don't know what to do with her. I don't know how to help her. She's really struggling. I mean, I've been on calls with teenage girls and they just burst out crying like within moments, and they don't understand. I mean, especially with social media, especially with, they're going through this transition in their life already, and the eating disorders start, the lack of understanding about nutrition and how their body starts, and then that's the foundation that they build their life on. I mean, I've worked with women in their 50s, 60s, and they're still dealing with those issues, but when we trace it back, it started in that 13 to 18 year range, and they've built their whole life on that foundation.
So I've told this story a few times, and I'm not going to go into the whole thing. If you look at my YouTube video, my trainer was on with me one Saturday morning, and he's another one of these guys. When he starts talking, I just want to go work out, right? So my wife and I started going to him pre-COVID, and he was not a coddler either. And I can remember laying on the floor once. He was having me do an exercise, and I'm thinking, this is just too hard. I was just going to quit. I'm like, and I got clothes that fit me at home, the fat clothes. But I didn't quit. I stuck with it. I lost 60 pounds that year. My wife was way down. We were so lean. It was just crazy. Then we had a couple of tragedies. These are excuses. A couple of tragedies and COVID come in. And that's super, so he and I were looking at doing something locally where we were going to connect your physical wellness with business wellness, right? Yeah. It all ties in together with your mind and everything else. And
absolutely,
that program you have with those kids that's amazing, because we were pretty clean eaters when our kids were being raised. We were pretty good at it, but my kids all have different levels of fitness now, right? So like my oldest daughter's just, her husband's like a bodybuilder, and so she's always on top of it, right? But some of my other kids, not so much. And I have a daughter that's a type 1 diabetic. And if I would have had someone like you, because frankly, the doctors weren't doing it for her. She needed somebody that could talk to her, that could relate to her, right? I couldn't. I'm her dad, and I'm not a girl, and all these
exactly
things. So that's awesome. Do
you what's crazy to go on in 17 years of school, it's like people look at medical doctors as like, oh, I'll do whatever they say. I mean, I've worked with individuals, like especially older individuals, they're like, whatever the doctor says, they're like all about it. In 17 years of school, they take one nutrition class. and nutrition is what's going in your body every single day.
Well, and when we were with our trainer, that was one of the big things we changed, right? We were eating clean. We were doing, I wasn't drinking as much. And in fact, we had a kind of a challenge, a 30-day challenge towards the end of our time with him. And that wasn't the end of our time, and I lost 19 pounds in that month, stopped drinking, and just cut out sugar. Carbs, I could tell when my body needed carbs. So I was self-monitoring, obviously. But I was good. I mean, I'd always eat the carbs in the morning if I had to, or whatever. And I'm no nutritionist, believe me. But is your training online? Or you do live training and online too?
No, we moved fully online in May of last year. So I was doing before COVID, right. I had a lot of things going on in San Diego, actually. I had a gym that I was renting out of, and I had a full roster of clients, and it was growing. And I was doing stuff with young athletes as well. And then my biggest thing is because I just have such a heart for seniors, because they are not given the tools and resources. Like, I would walk into a senior home and it's like death in there.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be. Like, I've worked with people in their late 80s, and I've seen them walk after being in a wheelchair for years, because your body is either breaking down every day, but you have the opportunity to fight back, right? You can build rather than break down. And so I was building a curriculum for the senior homes in San Diego, and right. I was loving it with nutrition and fitness. And then, of course, that was the first place to close. And then the gyms closed, and then everything closed down. And so what we did was I immediately had to shift everything. Like, the day after I was like at home and I was like, and I felt like I had no control over my life. I was like, all right, I didn't turn the news on once. I didn't turn on anything. And I literally just started consolidating all of my stuff. I was like organizing everything, cleaning things up. And then I spent 30 days doing that. And then on June 1st, we left San Diego to go to Alaska. And once we got there, I started building online, and I started with one client, and I just poured into that client 110%. And then I was like, hey, I have a great referral program, and she was loving it. So she started sending people to me. And then I just kept pouring into those people who were in front of me, and it just kept duplicating and duplicating and duplicating until now it's, we have several members all over the nation and multiple coaches who I'm focusing on highlighting their own expertise. But it just grew, and now we're fully online, and we are really maximizing that space. We're noticing a lot of people are, they've been sent home from the gyms, right? So they had to invest in home equipment. Right. And then even when gyms opened back up, a lot of people were not wanting to go back to the gym. And then it was just this back and forth thing. So a lot of people are loving being able to work out at home now. And then rather than their workout turning into this 2-hour thing where you're having to drive to the gym, do your workout, drive home, it's like, first thing in the morning, get it done, no excuses, maximizing 30 to 40 minutes, and then you're on with your day. And so
that's brilliant. And I'm going to, after this, I'm going to connect you and Sean Carden, because that's my trainer. And Sean was he's in Poway, and he works a lot with older people. So I used to go into the gym, and I was probably on average. I was probably on the younger, no, maybe not, maybe the middle, because I'm almost 60. So a year ago, I was working out with 25-year-olds, and they're like, oh my God. And I'm like, yeah, because I'm doing the right stuff, right? I'm eating right. I'm doing all those things. Today, not so much, but I'll get back to it. But he worked with a lot of older people that had hip problems. And God, he has this one guy, remember, he was this guy could not walk up a curb, right? He's close to 90 years old, I think. And he now his movement's so much better. And I have another gal that I work with I know her husband, and she's, in her 80s, and she's rocked up, this chick, at 80 years old. So, well, that's brilliant of you, because we know, when you stop moving, I knew I really had to get back in shape when I had a friend of mine that he knew by heart the television guide, right? The TV guide.
Oh no.
And I went, oh my God, you got to turn that TV off, dude, and get up, just go walking, whatever you got to do to do something. And we're raising 2 grandkids here. So I have kids in school again. And they keep me moving, right? I got to get out and do things with them. So then Nathan was telling me about this business you guys have up in Alaska too, for couples and things like that.
Treasure North. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that from your perspective versus what I know it's going to be about the same, but I think you have a different energy than Nathan, which is how it should be, right?
Yeah, well, so for me, and I'm just going to give like a little bit of backstory. So first of all, we grew up completely different. Right. I grew up, like I said, in and out of foster homes. I dealt with, I constantly had my guard up because my life would literally change overnight. Like I would be like, new family, new home, this. He grew up in a missionary family where his mom and dad have been married for years. It's like they're a very tight-knit family. And so, as I'm sure you can imagine, when those two people come together and they're not focused on the relationship, and when we come up against stress or we come up against life, we're going to handle it very differently, right? And that's what happened. And when we were in San Diego, we had all the ambition in the world when we moved from Alaska to San Diego, but no real tools or planning. And so we were young, we moved down to San Diego. We're like, all right, we're entrepreneurs. We're gonna make it happen. We're gonna build. We're gonna be like the fitness people. And then we get there, and obviously San Diego is very expensive, and there was a lot of stress that started coming at us, and we handled it very differently. I was conditioned to put walls up and shut down and focus on survival. And it was just And then he handled it very different. We found ourselves on opposite ends of the train tracks, and we were both going towards different things. And we're like, why? Like for me, and this is something we learned later, we had no idea each other's love languages, and I'm very much quality time. Like I could care less about gifts and things like that. And he was in his head, he was like, oh, well, I'm just working so hard to be able to provide you with like the cars and the nice things. And I'm like,
Right.
I don't want any of that. And I was like, I just want to go hiking, or I want to go. And so for me, I felt completely disconnected. And then for him, his is physical touch. And obviously I grew up with a lot of abuse. So I'm like, you're not even spending time with me. Why are you trying to touch me? You know? And
Right.
so we had a lot of disconnect there. And it wasn't that we didn't love each other or that we didn't want to like be together, but we were like going two completely different directions. And we ended up separating, which I'm not sure if he talked about that at all, but we ended up separating for almost a year and a half. And during that time, you know, we were apart. Well, we got back together. And when we got back together, we realized that we didn't have any tools to have a healthy relationship. And
Right.
so we couldn't just go at it from this place of like, oh, we want to be together, so let's just go back to exactly what we were doing before, you know? So we started investing in our relationship, just like we would in our business, just like we do in our
Yeah.
health. We
Sure.
became like marriage retreat junkies. Like we were going to all the marriage retreats, and we've actually been to them like multiple times. And then we started volunteering at them, and we just got really connected with mentors and books. And just again, just as much as we invest in our relation or in our business, just as much as we invest in our health on a daily basis, we saw the importance of investing in our relationship so that we don't ever get to that point, right? And
Right.
so we just keep adding tools. Like we don't wait till we're in a bad place to add tools to our tool belt. We keep adding the tools to our tool belt so that we don't ever get to that bad place where we don't have the tools to get through it. And so we've kind of, that's been the foundation. That was about 5, almost 6 years ago that happened. And we've just been building forward from there. And it's really been on our heart to, especially, we have so many conversations with other couples, and we try to be we don't try, we do. We are very authentic and open about our story and about the faults that both of us had and just kind of where we're at. And it's created this dynamic where others really open us up to us about where they're at in their relationship. And I feel like it's something that isn't talked about enough. I feel like it's not something that is focused on enough. It's like we live in a world where everybody's wearing a mask, like I'm fine, everything's good. But at home, they're struggling and things behind the scenes aren't good. And so it's really been on our heart to have a place where we can pour into couples and just create an experience. We're not trying to be relationship experts, but we want to facilitate an experience and bring others in. And just like you would go to a business mastermind, just like you would go to a fitness retreat, it's a place where the couple can come and create an experience together. So up in Alaska, what we're doing is we're creating like scavenger hunts and physical activity and hiking and biking and doing all these things together to build that relationship and to create a place where they can have these conversations. And so, yeah, that's kind of what that's evolving into. We were going to launch it this year, but we had like 20 million things going on, and the window of summer in Alaska is very small. So we're launching that next summer, and we're really excited about it.
So I did a podcast on expectations because I think that, so my wife and we met after having divorces, right? And we dated for about 4 years, and we talked a lot about expectations, right? What do you expect from me, and vice versa. Mm-hmm. And I think just in any relationship, whether it's a business relationship or whatever, you should have clear expectations. People usually don't. And then if they have an expectation that the other person doesn't even know about, because that happens a lot too. I expect you to do this and you don't do it. I'm like, hey, I expect you to do this. And they're like, oh, I didn't even know that. Right. So that happens. So we have a blended family. So we had to make sure that our kids were equally respected. And, if there were issues, I had to take care of sometimes with my kids, and she had to take care of her kids. So yes, it's exactly that. It's about And in business, we do this all the time. You know, we're getting over expectations now because I just ordered something from Amazon Sunday and I don't know why it's not here yet. It's 2 days, probably coming, you know, and I'm like, where the hell's my stuff? But, you know, because we've gotten, you know, this Facebook, um, we have our Facebook facade, right? The one that we put all the fun. Everything's great. Life is bitching, and no one's life is bitching. I got news for you.
No.
Everybody's got problems. Everybody's got concerns. A lot of
Yeah.
stress over the last 18 months with COVID.
Yeah.
Teenagers didn't have an identity barely before, and now they're wearing
Yeah.
masks, and now they don't, you know. So yes, and I am teamed up with two kind of supplemental education places that talk about human skills, teaching kids to have human skills. And I
Yeah.
think that's something when you're talking about those girls from 13 to 18, nobody really teaches them how to eat, right? Unless their parents are
No.
physical specimens, which that's just not the case. If you go outside and look, most
Yeah.
parents are not, you know, they've allowed themselves to change their expectations of what they have for themselves. But
Well, most parents are struggling themselves, and
sure,
what I see so much of is, for example, most parents who are in their, 40 or even 30s to 60s right now, they grew up with their mom like so confused, having poor body self-image, like doing a diet here and there, because if you think about the generation when they grew up, it was very different, the
sure.
understanding of nutrition and food and how that works. And so they're struggling themselves, and they're trying to teach their child to not end up where they were at, but their child is watching them, not listening to them, right? So they're
Well,
saying,
it's
eat
funny.
your
So
veggies,
I'm,
eat this.
like I said, I'm 60, so I grew up. I'm almost 60. I grew up. I'm probably your parents' age, right, at some level, and we ate what was put in front of us.
Yes.
There was no talk about nutrition. If it
Yeah.
was good for you or bad for you, you ate
Yep.
spam, for instance. I mean, I can't even stand looking at spam anymore. But
It's not even
we-
real food.
right, we ate it. I don't even know what. It's funny. I used to kid with my mom. She'd say, "Hey Ed, you know it's Lent. You can't eat because we're Catholic. You can't eat meat on Friday." And I said, "Well, I'm just gonna have a hot dog." She goes, "You can't eat that. That's meat." I said, "There's no meat in a hot dog, Mom. It's not. Are you serious? There's no meat in a hot dog. I can eat this on Friday." I didn't. But I would joke with her about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. We never. And then I guess so. And then when I was raising my kids, I had to eat what I could afford.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
I have this. We had both my wife and I. We have this brilliant way of making a lot of food for not much money, but you
Yeah.
know, it's boxed stuff. It's anything.
Yep.
You know, it's things like that
Yep.
we raise our kids on. Now, I don't have. I think my kids are pretty good with the body image because then we started getting in shape a lot better. We did a lot of. We rode bikes and surfed and did all this stuff with our kids and got out and exercised. And I've always worked out at some level, but no, you're right. But God, man, you have so much energy. I got to get you hooked up with Sean Carden because he might. I don't know if you're looking for other partners in that space.
Yeah, always.
If you watch my podcast with him, you'll go, yeah, I need to talk to this guy.
Yeah.
And he really
My big-
teaches you how to lift.
Yeah, that's my big thing too, is education. I actually have an opportunity that came up to create a curriculum for some colleges on creating a health class that counts as a health credit towards their degree. And for me, I love working with people, but what really lights my fire is educating people and educating them on how their body works. Like, we were not given a user manual, and the amount of effort that people put into trying to change their body, trying to be healthy, but they have no idea what they're doing. So they're like putting all their energy running up this mountain that is not even the right mountain. They're burning themselves out. They're spiking their
money.
Yeah, spending a ton of money, effort, getting more and more frustrated, getting further and further away from an actual sustainable lifestyle. And they're creating this identity about who they are as like this person that's always trying to lose weight, or like, I'll just start again next time, or I'll start on the first of the year and go through that sprint rather than changing their lifestyle.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, like I just see the light bulbs come on when I teach people about nutrition, when I teach them about how their body works and how to work with it and not against it. I feel like so many people that I encounter, men and women, they're fighting against their body. They're like working against their body rather than working with it and understanding it. And it's just, I feel like, again, we weren't given a user manual when we got our body. And so we're just taking the habits that were passed down to us, and we're trying really hard to go in a different direction, but not really. And then there's a level of shame that so many people have, as far as like, I mean, I can't tell you the amount of individuals that I've talked to that are like, have so much shame around it. And they're like, I feel like I should know how to take care of my own body, you know?
Yeah, no, we went through that. When he was going through, I tell you what, I was probably surprised. It was funny because I went from doing, maybe 2 hours of cardio a week, just, at the right times and to doing about 7 hours of cardio a week. So through that, when we did that challenge, and what a difference. And when I did the cardio was a big deal, right? Versus just doing it, right? Just walking on the treadmill for an hour. It was specific times I did it, or with specific food. And I was surprised it didn't have to cut that much out. It wasn't like I had to change everything. I just had to be real consistent. And was it a little boring? I'm not a sweet eater, so cutting that out to me was nothing. It might have challenged my wife a little bit more with that, but we were both doing great. And I tell you, you just fire me up, man. And I tell you, when I see you on Facebook, it's the same way. I get all fired up, and I'd like to, definitely hook you up. So I know, and I have another thing that we'll talk about once we're done here that you might be interested in. But so a lot of times during my podcast, we talk about challenges. We talk about leadership. And I know I'm a little older than you, or a lot older than you. And I always look back in my life and say, was I ever really led by somebody that I would call a good leader? And like my mom was a good leader, quiet leader, right? We didn't really know she was leading us until she wasn't around anymore. Have you ever worked for or been around a really efficient leader that might have helped you go in the right directions in life? And if you haven't, it's okay. I'm just always surprised by people when I ask them, and a lot of people go, you know what, I really haven't. And that shouldn't be like that, right? We should have those leaders out there to look to help us move on.
Yeah, I feel like, kind of funny enough, the first time I really experienced that, I mean, I had coaches in sports growing up, and to me, that's where I found, again, because of my upbringing and kind of what was happening, that's where I connected, was to those coaches. And I had a strength and conditioning coach in high school, actually, who scared the crap out of me, but was like, just inspired me so much, of just like, wow, the standard at which he holds himself to, the standard at which he holds, it like made me want to level up, and so that was kind of my first experience, was through athletics and through that type of personality. And then the first like real like mentor, I would say, that I had was actually my first job. I finished high school early and started college, and then I was working as a welder, and I was working on car parts. And my life at that time, like, I just knew I was like so desperate for a change, because I'm like, I was so shy. I would literally blush if somebody looked at me, and I was just so like not confident in who I was or myself. And I spent so much of my time being like put down and, squashed, no voice, no anything. And I quit that job and I went to go sell cars. And
I did that too.
My first month, I sucked. I was like literally hiding in the back of the lot when a car would come in. And of course the other salesman, because you know how that rotation works, it's like and of course the other salesmen were like eating that up. They're like, oh yeah, you go. And then like I had a guy who was the manager, and he really took me under his wing. And just really helped me. And there was actually two of them, but that was the first time that I feel like I had somebody in my life that like believed in me and was willing to coach me and mentor me. And so it just like that was a really cool time in my life because I ended up within, you know, a couple of months I became the top salesperson there. And I was just like I had people referring
Yeah.
people to
Good. No,
me, and I had like
big in
this
that
whole
business. Yeah.
experience that I created. But it was really that point in my life where like month one I was terrible. I was just terrified. And then it was literally that moment of somebody believing in me more than I believed in myself that changed everything in how I saw myself and how I did what I was doing. And that's something that, you know, I found those people more and more in my life. And that's something that I really try to do myself is challenge people more than, because I feel like we all just have so many limiting beliefs. And the way that I like, describe it to everybody, I don't even know where, if I ever heard this from somewhere, but it's just we all have this light. We're like this light, right? And we have our story, like you said, we have our passions, we have the impact that we're meant to make in the world. But so often we have a lampshade over it.
Yeah.
Because of the lampshade is limiting beliefs and doubts and fears, and it's like when that lampshade comes off, you're able to really shine and be that lighthouse for other people. And you're so confident in who you are and your beliefs and why you're doing it that you don't change that based on somebody else's perception of you. And I think like to trace it back, that was that first time that I really had that. And then I like searched for that throughout my life of people that were going to help me level up in that way.
You probably just summarized every podcast I've done since January because I talk about that light. I talk about finding that passion in you that you would do if you even didn't get paid. You would still do it, right? And everybody has that passion in them, but we have to draw it out. That's what my goal is to draw that out of that 18 to 40-year-old and say, you really do have a passion in you. And because people go, well, you know, I can't afford to do that. Yes, you can. You can afford to do that. If you want it bad enough, you'll do it. You know, so I told you there's 4 pillars to my thing. It's limitations, which you talked about. It's telling your story, which you've done. Self-esteem, which is the worst it's ever been in America, and it's been bad forever. You know, Jack Canfield, the co-author of the Chicken Soup books, he said at 5 years old, when Harvard tested these kids, their self-esteem was off the chart, right? They could fly if they wanted to. At 18, they're suicidal. I mean, what is happening in our world and in our education system, but that we're crushing these kids' dreams and crushing their hopes. But I want to draw that back out of people. And the last pillar of my thing is excuses, because I always tell you, I can make excuses to get out of anything. And you have to look in the mirror and tell yourself, that's an excuse. Don't give me that shit. Get out and do what you got to do. So yeah, you just summarized my entire podcast. I can quit now and retire. No, I'm not going to do it.
It's good. I like all those topics are so powerful.
I know, and you just did a great job at getting excited about all those. And it's funny when I'm kind of I get, you know, kind of wound up when I'm talking to people. I'm standing up and I'm walking around a room. I get really fired up and excited, and cuss words start flying out. And I told my wife,
in the power stance.
Yes.
And start
I told
sweating.
my wife, I think I'm going to raise this. I have one of these desks. I think I'm going to start doing my podcast standing up, because I feel like sometimes when I'm sitting down, my energy level drops a little bit.
Yeah.
And I try to be a little more articulate than I want to be, because I want to do what you just did and get people fired up. So, man, that's awesome. What a great story you have. And a tragic story at one level, but you overcame those limitations. And I grew up we grew up very poor, but our family was kind of intact, right? At least my mom was always there. My dad was kind of in and out. But and sometimes I wished, looking back, that my life would have been a little hard. I thought my life was hard, but I got over it relatively easy. So I'm either super strong or it wasn't as bad as I thought, right? One or the other. But I see these people that are struggling, And I just want to put my arms around them and say, look, it's going to be okay. We just got to get you thinking right. And you got to see that light in you, right? You got to, in the mirror, when you get up, you got to tell the right story to yourself. Because I did a thing on storytelling once, and I kind of told my life story in two ways, one real positive and one real negative. I could have leaned on bad stuff. I grew up around gangs. I could have been in gangs. So you really got to be careful what story you're telling yourself, right?
Yeah.
And what you've done is told yourself that anything's possible. I can get over these limitations. It was all a lesson. Yeah. And thank God for those mentors, that leadership you had. And I was going to tell you too about my trainer. I would go in and he'd say, Ed, what have you been eating? And I'm like, what do you mean? I've been, following. He's like, horse shit. You're not following the meal plan. Because if you did, you wouldn't look like you do right now. So he was not taking any of my excuses. And, at times I really wanted to quit. And on my 58th birthday, I did a 500-pound deadlift. And,
Nice.
I'm like, because he got me to that point. Now, I guess on my 60th, I got to try to do 600, but I really need to get back to the gym a little more consistently. So, man, what else is up with you guys? I know Nathan's got about 100 irons in the fire too, but.
To kind of build off of what you were just saying about the narrative of what you're telling yourself every day, It's funny because I found myself, so my life, I live outside of my comfort zone. Like I get uncomfortable when I'm inside of my comfort zone because I know that I'm not growing. And It was through taking those actions, early on. But it's funny because I find myself, when I'm faced up against something that's difficult, I'm like, you've already beaten every statistic.
Yep.
Like you've already overcome divorce, you came back from the dead with your marriage. You ended up, the people around me growing up that were in my situation, the completely different path that they went down.
Sure.
And I see it still today. Addiction, like alcoholism. I developed even though I was on the front end, doing everything right, it was behind closed doors, my relationship with myself was not intact. I was using alcohol. I was just finding myself trying to escape certain things that I felt. And over the last couple of years, just diving into the shame, diving into the trauma, and just pulling it all out. And it's really cool because it is that story of I feel like I could do anything, not in an arrogant way, but in a way of when I look back. So even though in the moment I'm oh, I don't know if I could do that. And I'm I didn't think I could do any of that, Sure. And it's just recreating that narrative.
I had this thing, I used to have Audible, right? I had a audible.com. I had a subscription and I wasn't using it. So I went to cancel it and it says you have credits left. So I just said, okay, well, I picked 12 books. One of them was about Navy SEALs, about this one speech I was listening to about Navy SEALs. And I said, it's hard for me to relate to a Navy SEAL. Yes, they're this ultimate warriors of the world and all that. But I said, you really need to look into your circle and find those inspirational people, right? The ones like you. Here, not that you're not super important in life, and it's a 1 in 400 trillion chance you were even born scientifically, right? I bring this up all the time. Yeah. You have an intrinsic value in life, and you saw that in yourself, and that is hard to do. I'm sitting here while you're talking, thinking, I'm picking out which daughters need to see this podcast. Right out of my 7 daughters.
Out of all of them.
Yeah, so some of them have struggled with different things. And you know what the answer is? All 7 of them need to watch this podcast because I'm seeing different daughters in your struggles in life. But I am so impressed with you, Lacey. I really want you on my podcast again, and we should even come up with a topic that we can do.
Yeah.
And hopefully it helps me, it helps my listeners, it helps you and your followers, and use this any way you can to motivate or whatever you got to do. And I don't even know what else to say to you. I'm so impressed with what you're doing, and you're exactly. I want to get people from where they're at now to where you're at, exactly. Like what you did, is having to look inside yourself and go, I got to change what I'm doing, and I can do this and I can do that. And man, you were a welder. You're rugged, chick. Look at you.
Yeah.
Hauling Christmas trees when you're 8 years old,
Yeah.
and then you're welding car parts.
But you know what? That brings me to another point of what you were just saying is like after I've been through a lot and I don't look at it as a disadvantage or an advantage. I think everybody at the end of the day, I think everybody has their own story.
Sure.
And when I start feeling sorry for myself or thinking like, oh, poor me, it's like I talked to 10 other people who has something mind blowing to me, and I think we all have our own story, and whether our trauma is type A or type B, it's we all grow up with beliefs and traumas that shape us, right? And then it creates shame and it creates walls in our life in different areas. And
Yeah.
one thing that I've really come to realize over the last couple of years, and I thought I was tough. I was like, oh yeah, like let me just be stronger, fitter. Like I don't need anybody else. I have. And what I realized is that getting back up after you get knocked down is the easy part, right? And it was like I was so conditioned to be like, all right, back up, let's go.
Yep.
Like, is that all you got, life? And it was just like I kept getting back up, kept getting back up. But it wasn't until the last couple of years that I started actually opening back up and allowing others to see me, to hear me, to be seen, to be heard. Like there was no way. I mean, I think a few years ago, there was no way I would share my story because I didn't want people to look at me like I was any different. I've had this mentality of like, okay, just because I started out further behind in life doesn't mean that I can't have something that that person has.
Right.
And it created so much isolation in my life and so much, and that's what led to those fruits of drinking alcohol and hiding and keeping my light dimmed was because of that mentality. But really at the end of the day, our deepest desire as human beings is to connect, to know, and to be known, to be able to sit here and be fully authentic and transparent in every piece of myself and be accepted for that. And then vice versa, to know every part of you and to still accept you and to really connect on that level. And I feel like we've gotten so far away from that as a culture, as a world. And it's just like you were saying, like the social media, it's just everything's good, everything's fine, on the surface, but we don't know how to actually share who we are.
Yeah.
And we don't know how to disconnect the fact that I'm not that person, I'm not that person that had an affair on my husband. I'm not that person that did all those things. And because I've grown from that, and I'm able to share it. I'm able to talk about it, and I'm able to talk about it and help somebody else who's going through that. Because I think that's where our real purpose comes in, is when we're able to connect to where somebody else is going through that point in life, and we're able to help them through it because we're able to use our experience in that way,
Right. And those people that do those things are not bad people. And that's the other thing I want to get to, is to say, there's a video called The Bar Stool and the Church Pew, and it talks about how the judgment in a church pew versus no judgment on the bar stool, right? But it's real.
It's a great
because
title.
we need to stop doing this judging thing and help lift people up instead, right?
Yeah.
And we had some serious tragedies, like TV movie tragedies, happen in the last 2 years. And Sean said to me, my trainer, one day, he says, how the hell do you get up in the morning, on certain days? And I said, well, I got to get up, right? I got to get up. I got people counting on me. I got to go do those things. And I didn't create the problems, although I've inherited some of them. It's just life, you just got to go through life sometimes. And, you get your power. It's funny because I don't really like macaroni and cheese because I was so poor when I was a young parent. That's all we seemed to eat all the time. I don't know how the kids can still eat it, but it's just those things you go through. I've had my power shut off. I've had cars repoed. I've had all that stuff.
Yeah.
And one of my goals on this thing too was to be really transparent. So now I don't talk about those specific tragedies because there's other people involved in. I'm not going to, get their name out there. But man, Lacey, you're on fire. You're great. I love, and it's funny because Nathan, what's typical in a relationship, he's a little, less he's a little flatliner, you know, a little less excited about things, and that's cool. I mean, that's his approach. And to me, he's just really super intelligent guy, right? He's just this
Yeah.
upper intelligence
Yeah.
level, just
Yeah.
like you, but you guys just express yourselves differently. And
Yeah.
I'm not surprised you're like this, but I'm so happy you're just this fireball energy. So
Thank you. Yeah, we're
anyway,
learning to work together a
yeah,
lot, and because we're both drivers, we're both like very
a little different,
passionate drivers.
little
Yeah,
different approach to life,
and
right?
he definitely sees the big picture a little bit more and kind of sees forward, where I'm like, I had no idea a year ago I would be here. So
Right.
I have no idea where I'm going to be at a year from now, but I'm going to show up every day and give 110% to whatever's right in front of me and just keep growing and building. And so that's kind of my philosophy. So in business, that's kind of turned into like the COO is me, and then he's
Right.
the CEO in it. And we're learning to work together in that dynamic, where we definitely struggled to work together in the beginning of like, we were like butting heads a lot, and
Sure.
I had a vision, he had a vision, but I think it's really good because we're able to accomplish so much more together when
Yeah.
we both step into our strengths in that way. And yeah, I mean,
Well,
just in
that's that
life,
whole,
it's
you
been
know, you got to,
awesome.
when you communicate with people and people are honest with you, you learn a lot, right?
Yeah.
Because you only see what you see, right? It's
Yeah.
hard to get that. It's hard to have complete peripheral vision. You're seeing, you're
Yeah.
a little bit, you know, everybody's like that. They have their own vision of what's going on, but if someone steps in, so we jumped off a big cliff after I grew up in this house that I moved out of 40 years out of Poway. I haven't lived out of Poway in forever, right? And um, and I wanted to do this podcast, and I wanted to get out there and start doing more public speaking and stuff. And we jumped
Yeah.
off this cliff. I said, you know what? I'm not doing what I don't want to do anymore. Just not going to do it.
Yeah.
It's just crappy. I'd rather be homeless and doing what I want than living in a
Yeah.
big mansion. So I'm going to go back to something you said. I did a podcast on worthiness. When I was growing up, it always seemed like that other person was more worthy to have a nicer car or a nicer house or a nicer family. I grew up with this one family that parents were really educated, and they had a pool and all these things, and we lived in a shithole. And you know what,
But in
though?
Poway?
No. This was in East San Diego before we moved to Poway. I lived in a
I was
really
like,
bad
are
neighborhood.
there any bad places in Poway?
Well, I mean, funny you said that, because when I went to Poway, there was kids driving Corvettes to school. They had nicer cars than the teachers had, right? I didn't grow up on that side of Poway. I didn't grow up in North Poway. I grew up in normal Poway. But looking back now, I have more friends on Facebook, more friends in high school on Facebook than I had when I was in high school. And some of those people that I thought were just going to be tearing it up, not so much, because they had everything when they grew up.
Yeah.
And they never learned how to do what their parents did or whatever. And I was real surprised by that. Like, and then tragedy can happen. I mean, you know, you could lose a spouse or a child or something like that, and it can flip your whole world upside down. So you're not guaranteed anything in life. I mean, here we had this accident yesterday in Santee. I don't know if you heard about it. This plane crash.
Wow.
So we had a plane crash, and here's a guy. The only two people that died was the pilot and a UPS driver, of all people. So that guy got up yesterday morning to deliver packages and gets hit by an airplane in a neighborhood. I mean, you just don't know how your life is going to change. So appreciating it and doing what you love in life is monumental, right? So many people are working in jobs and they're just dying on the vine, right? Because they're not doing what they love.
Can I tell you
on
something?
Accident are doing what you love.
So when I went to this leadership retreat a few years ago in Dallas, Texas, and super powerful, there was about 300 entrepreneurs there who were all high achievers, healthy, motivated, driven individuals. And we're on this ranch. There's no cell service. We're like horseback riding, archery, zip lining, swimming pool. You know, it's just fun, like energetic weekend with lots of different seminars, like full immersion. On the last day of the trip, they had us all in a room together. They locked the doors, turned off all the lights, had us put our phones away. So they didn't have service already, but now they were off completely. And they asked us, imagine you just got the news that you had 1 hour to live.
Hmm.
And you don't have access. You can't call your family. You can't call anybody. You can't go anywhere. You don't have enough time to drive somewhere within the next hour. You're here by yourself with your thoughts. What are you thinking about? Right? This is when people are reflecting on what they've done up to this point. So what is going through your head? What do you wish you would have done? What do you wish you would have said? What relationships do you wish you would have mended? What are you thinking about in that hour left to live, right? What's really important to you? And then you say, okay, now we take a step back. So now you have 1 week to live. Now you have time to drive home, go visit your family or whoever, go put into action those thoughts that you just had. What are you doing, right? Who are you seeing? Who are you spending that time with? Because on day 8, it's lights out. There's no day 8. It's you have 7 days. And what are you doing? How are you maximizing that time? Now you take a step back even further. You have 1 year to live, 365 days, no 366th day, 365 days. How are you using what's important to you? How are you making an impact? How are you letting the world know Ed was here? What kind of impact are you leaving? What have you learned and taken with you? And how are you giving back with that, right? And the reality at the end of the day is that is reality. Because like you just said, the guy that woke up in the morning to go to work had plans for after work, right? And so if you're not living every single day passion filled and purpose driven and taking action on those things that are so important to you, you're going to end up having regrets, right? We always put things off till tomorrow, like, oh, mending that relationship, or I'm on my own journey right now, mending a lot of relationships from growing up where I held a lot of resentment, like towards my foster parents and towards my family and things like that. And all I did was just carry that along with me throughout my life. It's not like I just put it on a shelf. It affected all of my future relationships moving forward. So it's just something that I think is really important to look at how you're living every single day, not just the big picture vision, right? Making sure that every day you're doing what is important to you, you're living by your values, and you're using those values to make an impact. Because at the end of the day, that's what's really important to us, is the relationships in our life and the people around us.
So I'm this big believer of people come into your life for certain reasons, right? And I think we're here for a purpose, right? I don't know what the purpose is yet, but last Wednesday night I went and did a speech at I'm part of the Knights of Columbus, which is a Catholic men's group, right? We just do a lot of charitable work, right? We raise money, we give it away. I did a thing on 27 things that hospice nurses told people that they say on their deathbed. And it's exactly all those things, right? I wish I had cared for myself physically better. I wish I had spent more time with my kids. I took people do, in January, they do resolutions, right? And I remember one year I said, I'm going to tell people how I feel about them. This is just a few years back. Now, that didn't always work out for everybody because I didn't feel good about some people. And I was honest with them and told them how I felt.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it was positive, going to people and going, hey, if I never told you, I appreciate what you do. And so these 27 things I went over, one of them was I wish I had pursued more of my dreams. I used to work with a guy that was a sales guy, and I said, man, if you weren't doing this, what would you want to do? He says, I wanted to be a school teacher. I actually have my credentials. And I said, how long have you been in sales? He says, 30 years. I said, why weren't you a school teacher? She says, I couldn't afford it. I had kids. I had to feed my kids. I'm like, so for 30 years, you've been doing what you didn't want to do? Isn't that? And that started changing my perspective and saying, you know what?
Yeah.
I want to get up and talk in front of people and leave them feeling like you're leaving me right now, right? Just ready to rock and motivated. So that's what we decided to do this last year. And I'm panicking at this point because I'm not, getting income from this yet. But I think it's going to, I don't even think, I know it's going to work out because I'm starting to meet the right people. You, Nathan. Yeah. I have a whole circle of friends. Oddly enough, they're usually half my age because I can't get people my age to kind of get that process back, right? They're like, I'm too old. All they're thinking about is retiring. People that run companies I know don't want to change anything because they're going to retire in 5 years. It's like, but what about the culture of your younger people? What are you doing for them,
Yeah.
And they go, well, you can change that culture. And I'm like, no, you need to change. You can't change them if you don't change. So
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I think there's so much wisdom being left on the table. You know, these people, like you said, they're getting ready to retire, and they've spent a lifetime, you know, learning things and gaining information. And at the end of the day, they're probably not going to get that out. They're probably not going to help somebody else advance their life forward, or help somebody else navigate through their problems or issues or pains, because they're, you know what I mean? It's just being
Well,
left
that's
on
what
the
this whole
table.
podcast was about when I started. It was like, look, I went
Yeah.
to a guy one time. He's a world-renowned speaker. Okay. He was graduated from Annapolis, and I sat down and said, look, I want to get into this world of speaking, public speaking. And he says, well, Ed, you haven't done anything yet. And I left having coffee with him like dejected. I'm like, well, I guess he's right. I haven't run a company. I haven't run these multi-billion-dollar companies. I haven't done any of that. Then I went home and I started thinking. I said, you know, I raised $7 in the sun in San Diego, right? I'm raising 2 grandkids. I've accomplished a lot in sales and marketing and friendships and all these things. And I started thinking, you know, Tom Brady couldn't do my life. I mean, he could if he wanted to, but if you put him, if we switch places, of course, I can't throw a touchdown either, but if we switch places, he'd have a problem navigating, doing all the shit I got to do. You know, I'm a soccer mom half the day. I got to take this kid there and that kid there.
Yeah.
And then doing a podcast, and then I have to look for a job, and then I'm doing this, and I'm selling this. And and so my whole goal was, look, I have done stuff. I could give you advice about a lot of things that I struggled with or went through. And if I can just help a couple of people, I know people always say that. Kind of go, oh, that makes sense. And what happened was my son was talking to this guy once, a friend of mine, but better friend of his, older guy, older than me. And he had asked me a question, my son did, and I answered the question. And a week later, my son came back and said, hey, Tom told me this. And I said, you know, son, I just told you that last week. Exact words, I just told you. But he listened to him, not me, because I'm his dad. So I thought if I could get out to the young people and they'll listen to me instead of their parents, me telling them the same thing, then who's it hurting? It's just helping that kid.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Well, Lacey, I want you to, first of all, email me your information, because I want to put this link in when I do send out this podcast.
Yeah.
You're amazing.
Thank you.
I'm not that I didn't think you were going to be amazing, but you blew me away. So I'm going to really sell this podcast, because you're doing, at your age, you're doing exactly what I'm trying to get people to understand can be done. And you're proof that it can be done.
Absolutely.
You know, great story, great everything. I can't even, this is one of, I always say this. So I don't always say this. This is one of my best podcasts already. You're one of the best guests I've had, because you're living what you're preaching, right? And that's awesome. So,
well, I appreciate your conversational approach and just the willingness to even be here. You know, like you said, you're 10 months in, you're already past the 7-month-ish, but you are seeing bigger than, you're focused on the process and not the result. You know, you believe in what you're doing, you believe in creating this platform, and I just want to encourage you, keep doing it, because it's needed, it's important, and you know, it's, if you just keep focusing on the process, the result will happen.
Awesome. Do you want to plug anything right now that you have, any website or anything? I'm going to put it on that link too.
Yeah, our website is hybridathletetraining.com, and I'm on Facebook and Instagram, Lacey Mystery Bird. But yeah, the biggest things we have going on right now is really my passion and focus is working with these teen girls. So anybody that you know that has a child between the ages of 13 and 18, female, who is struggling with body image, self-confidence, or overall health, this program is for them, and we kickstart that on November 1st. So I'm super excited about it. And you can just head to the website, reach out to me directly, and
And we're going to talk for just a minute when I'm done. So this is the edfranklin.no limits podcast. Like I said before, if you want to contact me, it's edfranklin.nolimits@gmail.com. Great guest today. Share this podcast. Get it out to those young people. Lacey's living proof she's living proof that you can do what I'm trying to tell you can do. So it's coming from an old guy. Well, now it's coming from a young chick. So she can tell you that's not an insult, by the way. Young woman say that. EdFranklin.no limits. Thank you again, Lacey, and hang tight when I stop the recording here.
Okay.